Let's talk about the dinosaur in the room. Well, not really a dinosaur. A planet. Well, not really a planet. A dwarf planet. Well, if you ask me, it's not really a dwarf planet. It's a Kuiper Belt object. Well, of course, I'm talking about Pluto. Now, most of you who have taken this course, we were a little young when we, quote, demoted Pluto. But it was a huge deal. Now, Pluto was discovered in the earlier part of the 20th century. For political, historical reasons, they were looking for a ninth planet. And the first thing that they found that wasn't an asteroid and wasn't a comet, they called a planet before they knew anything about it. But as we learned more about this object, we figured out that it was small, smaller than our moon. And then we found that it had a moon that was half its size. And the two objects sort of orbited each other. Now, the thing about science is that science is supposed to be self-correcting. When you make a mistake, you're supposed to admit it and correct it. For example, in biology, rabbits used to be classified as rodents. And my pet rodents, when I get mad at them because they choose something they're not supposed to, like a book or a pair of shoes or the couch, I call them a bunch of filthy rodents. But they're not rodents. They're not classified as rodents anymore. They're in their own group called Lagomorphia, the rabbit-like creatures. Similarly, when we figured out that Pluto was a lot smaller than we thought, and we figured out that it wasn't like the terrestrial planets and properties, and it wasn't like the Jovian planets and properties, well, maybe it's a different kind of critter. Remember we talked about Triton, the largest moon of Neptune, in the last video. Triton turned out to be very similar to Pluto. And then we discovered an object that was almost exactly the same size as Pluto in an orbit out past Neptune. And they named it Eris, after the goddess of discord. How many of these things were there out there? And are we going to name each one of these things a planet? So, because science is self-correcting, and because Pluto just didn't fit with any of the other planets, it was time to reconsider our classification. In comes politics. Do we want to dishonor Clyde Tombaugh, who discovered Pluto, by demoting the object that he found? Does it make it less important if he found the first Kuiper Belt object? I don't think so. And Clyde, he's dead. I don't think it's any dishonor to him. Now, granted, his family disagrees, but that's their personal opinion. Science is not a democracy. Science is not about feelings. Science should be about the facts. So there's only one group of astronomers that has the right, if you will, right as defined by professional astronomers around the world, to name things. And that's the International Astronomical Union. And so the International Astronomical Union tried to come up with a definition of a planet because there really wasn't a working definition of a planet. It was the things we call planets. And then with Pluto, what is this thing? So they came up with a definition, which I don't think anybody thinks it's truly satisfactory, but at least it's a start. And under this definition, Pluto failed. And so Pluto is now considered a dwarf planet. Well, what's a dwarf planet? It's something that orbits the sun. It's large enough to be round, but it doesn't clear its orbit. So, for example, Ceres, the largest asteroid. Well, there's other objects in the asteroid belt around it, so it doesn't clear its orbit. And it is large enough to be round. So that's considered an asteroid and a dwarf planet. Similar thing with Eris, the one that challenged Pluto. It's part of the Kuiper Belt. It doesn't clear its orbit. So we call it a dwarf planet because it's about the size of Pluto. Pluto, well, its orbit overlaps Neptune for about 20 years out of every 250. Do you want to call that not clearing its orbit? But then, of course, you could say that Neptune doesn't clear its orbit if Pluto's orbit overlaps it. It's not a really great definition, but it's sort of the best we have. The point here is that in science, even though we work by the facts, sometimes the facts are not clear-cut. Sometimes nature does not like to be put in little boxes. It does not like to be pigeonholed. Personally, I think if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck. Pluto is near the edge of the Kuiper Belt. It is made of the same stuff as the Kuiper Belt objects. It's the same size as the Kuiper Belt objects. It has an orbit similar to the Kuiper Belt objects. Why don't we just call it Pluto, king of the Kuiper Belt, instead of calling it the tiniest planet or one of those weird dwarf planet things that we're not really sure what they are, but we had to call them something?